So in today's video, I'm going to take a deep but simplified dive into the evidence-based approach of task-specific training and how to apply it to improving hand function after stroke. After watching this video, you'll understand how to therapeutically set up activities at home to improve hand function even if you don't have access to therapy. Let's get into it. The easiest way to break down this topic is into the 5 R's of task-specific training. And if you've ever coached a little league team, played a sport, or learned how to play a musical instrument, some of these principles may sound familiar to you. The first R of task-specific training is relevancy. And as an occupational therapist, this is something that just comes naturally to me after years of training. But if you're a survivor learning how to do this on your own at home, it may take a little more practice to incorporate relevant things to you versus just doing exercises alone. The reason that relevancy is so important is because our brains like things that they're familiar with. They prioritize and strengthen neural pathways or brain pathways that are used often and that are familiar. So for example, think back maybe to a time when you were driving, and have you ever had the experience where you're going somewhere familiar and you've gotten in the car, you're driving, and all of a sudden it's like you blink and you're at your destination? It's like your brain almost went on autopilot because it was a route that you're super familiar with. So if you're working on improving hand function, include activities and other things that you enjoy doing as part of your home recovery program. Making a point to include relevant and familiar things that you enjoy as a part of your recovery towards improving hand function is necessary, and your brain will like it. The other piece of being relevant in your home recovery program is to practice things authentically. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that let's say that you're working on cooking and you've got trouble with grip and coordination, and you're wanting to try to cut up some vegetables for something that you're cooking. Well, in an ideal world, you'd be practicing this, you'd be working on these skills in the context of cooking, actually cooking, rather than some therapists may provide like therapeutically or something else resistive to cut, but you're not actually cooking. And it's not that it's wrong to do it that way, it's just that it's been found to be more effective with task-specific training if you're actually doing the task. And don't get me wrong, I know that doing rehab this way at home can be super frustrating, especially if you're just hungry and you want to eat. So what I tell my clients is do as much as you can with your affected hand, especially if it's your dominant side. And then if you start getting frustrated, back off and swap over to your unaffected side. The second R of task-specific training is random, specifically to randomly order your practice. But what the heck does that even mean? Well, it might mean that you vary the environment or the situation that you're practicing your home recovery program. But to better understand this, let me break it down with an example. I'm going to continue using that cooking example from the first section. So let's say that you're making a simple meal, and the point of it is that you're working on improving your grip strength, your coordination. Well, to use the principle of randomness, we might say, okay, I'm gonna cook at different times of the day so that my brain doesn't just associate cooking with a morning activity or an evening activity. It says, okay, this can happen anytime. Another way to introduce randomness into your home recovery program is, sticking with the cooking example, perhaps you use spoons, stirring spoons, that have a larger and a smaller grip. So you're not only working on improving your grip strength with those different sized grips, but you're also introducing some randomness into your practice to challenge your brain. The idea behind the randomness principle is that it will help you to retain this information as you're relearning some of these skills, but also to generalize what you're learning across similar tasks. So let's say, for example, you've been working on that cooking and maybe particularly on getting that stirring movement down. Well, think about washing dishes. We also need to be able to hold something in our hands, move our arms in a circular motion as well. So we hope that by implementing some randomness, we can generalize those same skills from the stirring to washing dishes. The third R of task-specific training is repetition. Research has shown us that the more that we practice something, the better we usually get. And this is due to neuroplastic changes that happen in our brain when we practice. And if that sounds like a foreign concept to you, check out my recent video on why hand recovery takes so long to get some answers. So to put this concept into a real life example, think about someone learning how to play the violin. If you've ever tried, you know that when you first start off, your playing sounds like a cat in distress. However, if you keep practicing, you get better. It turns into that muscle memory. Our brain prioritizes those familiar pathways. Proficient violinists like Andrew Bird have to practice intensely and often to make sure that those neural pathways, those brain pathways, are maintained. And if we go back to our cooking example, the more that you practice cooking and each of those individual tasks that require gripping, strength, and range of motion, all of those things, hopefully the better those things will get as the brain prioritizes those neural pathways. In theory, repetition is one of the easiest principles to implement, but repetition is time-consuming, and the research still hasn't come out to say exactly how many repetitions will create those neural pathways, although some articles have said hundreds, if not thousands. However, don't let this stop you from starting. Doing something is better than nothing. Practice what you can when you can. And implement this principle with others, like doing things that you enjoy to make it easier. The fourth R of task-specific training is reconstruction, or breaking down the pieces of the activity or the task that you want to be able to do, working on those pieces, and then reconstructing them to do the task as a whole. Now, this is my area of expertise as an occupational therapist, but it's a skill that you can learn too. Let's continue with our cooking example and say that we want to cook spaghetti with a jarred pasta sauce. Well, if we break down this activity into its component parts, we realize how much hand function that we really need for it and how it can really be very therapeutic, especially if we need to work on each of those component pieces. For example, let's break this activity down. We need enough dexterity, fine motor coordination, pinch strength, and grip strength to even open up the pasta box. Then we need enough hand strength and arm strength to fill up the pot with water and move it over to the stovetop. We need enough shoulder flexion and elbow extension to even lean over and turn the stove on. We'll need enough forearm pronation, which is turning our palm down, to empty the box of pasta into the boiling water. We need enough grip strength to open the spaghetti sauce jar, and we also need enough overall arm strength to be able to lift that heavy pot off and forearm movement to be able to turn and strain the water off the pasta. And that's just taking into consideration arm and hand movement and strength. We're not talking about any visual, perceptual, cognitive issues on top of that. But this is a technique that you can use at home too. So think about the activities that you want to get back to and practice breaking them down into their component parts and figure out, okay, where am I having trouble and what pieces of this activity do I need to work on so that I can get my hand function better? You can practice just those component pieces until you feel like you've gotten comfortable enough to reconstruct and try the activity as a whole. The fifth and final R of task-specific training is reinforcement. And this is typically used by therapists to provide positive feedback to someone working in therapy. Now, if you're working on your recovery at home without access to stroke-specific therapy, you may not have someone who is coaching you through this feedback and reinforcement process. However, you can still use this principle of giving positive feedback and reinforcement to yourself. Let's go back to this cooking example. Let's say that you've been doing really well about repetition, you've been practicing a lot, and maybe you even deconstructed, worked on each piece, and then reconstructed the activity as a whole. And maybe you noticed that the task as a whole has actually gotten a little easier. Maybe you notice that you're getting a little better dexterity and fine motor coordination, or that your grip strength is better when you're holding on to the spoon to stir. Well, this is an opportunity to give yourself that much needed positive feedback. Maybe you step back and for a moment just say, wow, this is getting better. I can see that I'm getting better and I'm making improvement. And really make a point to give that positive feedback to yourself. So get creative. Just because you may not have stroke-specific therapy doesn't mean that you won't make any more progress. It may take a little more time and effort to learn how to do these techniques and strategies and implement them. But if you want to, you will, and I know that you can. All right, everyone, that's it for today. I hope that you found this deep dive into task-specific training helpful. Try it as part of your home recovery program and let me know what you think. And stay tuned because the next couple of videos I'm putting out are also going to cover some other evidence-based strategies to improve hand function after stroke. You can subscribe or hit the bell for notifications so that you don't miss out. And as always, I'm going to leave a link down in the description below if you'd like to sign up for my email list, which gets you 3 free stroke recovery tips and motivational emails a week, as well as a free copy of my ebook, The Stroke Recovery Pocket Guide. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.